Hello, this is Clement Donald back for yet another Visual Basic.net tutorial series video. In this video, I'm going to introduce one of the most fundamental and important features of programming. And this is not just Visual Basic specific or .NET specific. This is a fundamental concept for all programming languages. And so we're going to introduce the concept of the class. And we're going to look at a few things within the class library. So we want to see what is a class. We'll define a class, set some properties, use a constructors method, as well as look at some things that we can do in the future. Now for this tutorial I have set up a pretty extensive program to run behind it because I want to show something that's really cool and give you other things as well. So in this particular tutorial we are starting for and going to run R2-D2's droid factory. So what he's going to do is he's going to build droids, and as they come off the production line we're going to add them to our inventory. So we're not going to get to quite to that point by the time we're done this tutorial, but after this tutorial and another tutorial we will be at that point. So the first concept we're going to do here is we're going to look at the class itself. So within the project itself, we want to add a new item. And so we're going to go ahead and say add a class. And in this particular object, you want to give it a name. Now, this is an object, so we give it a camel case name. And in this particular case, I'm just going to use the name droid. Alright, so each particular instance of a class will define a droid. So we'll add that in there. And now we've got a class called a droid, and please note that there's no user interface for this particular item. You notice the icon's different here? It is only a code file. So within this code file, we can define what is a droid. So a class is an object which can be instantiated, and it can actually be a data type. And that particular object also has properties, methods, procedures, delegates, and all those other things that come with the classes that we're used to using within the .NET framework. So what are the properties of a droid? First of all, we want to declare these using the public name because we want to be able to use these outside of this file. So a droid would have a designation, and that designation would be a string. So R2-D2 for instance. And then we could do public property owner name, for instance. Okay, and that would also be a string. We could do public property primary color. So what is the primary color? And we'll set that as a drawing.color. Okay. I'm just going to copy and paste this a couple times. I'm going to do two more. And so we're going to set the secondary color as a color. And then we'll set the last property as is in service as a boolean. So is that droid actually in service yet? So what we've done here is we've really quickly defined a class and we've given it some properties. So if we take this class and describe it in English, we've actually defined a droid. And a droid has properties such as what color is it, who owns it, what name have you given it, is it an active droid, and these are the kind of things. So you can define that item. So if I go back to my other form now, I can go ahead and instantiate a variable. So I can say something like private current droid as droid. That's pretty cool. See how it's done? So you actually can define the droid. There we go. And so then what we want to do is when we load the project, we want to actually instantiate that droid. So we're going to say current droid equals new droid. Now, one of the things that class definitions have are what's called constructors. These constructors are based upon the new method. So when I say new here, in all the coding we've done prior to this, we've always said, okay, let's define something and let's set its defaults. Let's define a list of input controls and set their defaults. Well, when you're defining a class, the new constructor is the ability to create default values. So underneath the properties here, I'm going to go to my droid class object and I'm going to set the new constructor. Okay? And what this does is it lets me set the default value. So I can say designation equals string.empty. I can say owner name equals string.empty. Because as they come off the production line, they may or may not have designation or a thing. We can say primary color equals white. Secondary color equals white. And then we can say is in service equals false. Okay, they come off the production line, they're not in service yet. So now what we've done is this new constructor executes whenever we define something as a new class object. So when I say new droid, automatically that droid will inherit these properties with the values as defined in the new constructor. That's actually really cool because that makes it really easy, because I'm going to define hundreds of droids or thousands of droids coming off a production line, and so I don't want to have to go and set defaults every time. So the new constructor allows me to do that automatically without even having to think about it. It just happens automatically. So then what we want to do is we want to say, okay, so we've got a form here where we've got some input, so I can go ahead and create a droid in this particular user interface. And I've used some color dialogues and a few cool things here, but that's not the point of this tutorial. So when I actually go to save the droid, what I want to do is I want to actually want to store the information that's in the input boxes in the class object instance. So we're going to say dimd as new droid. Okay. And then what we can do is we can go ahead and set its properties. So d.designation, and see how the IntelliSense already works for our personally custom designed class. So d.designation equals me.txt designation.text, which is a text box that I've used on the form. So d.ownerName equals me.txt owner.text. And d.isInService equals me. I have a checkbox on the form. d.primary color is equal to, now for this one it's a little confusing. I set up labels, and what I did is using the color dialog, I set the background color of the label to the color chosen through the dialog, which allows me to say, okay, I can now store the primary color based on a property of a label, although that's not a value. It actually is something we can use, which is actually quite useful. So, and I've done the same thing for the primary. And I also have two sets of labels, one for input, one for output. These are the input ones, so I've named them appropriately. So there we go. We've defined a class object and we've set its properties from something that we called ourselves, which is pretty cool. So then in order to actually do something, we want to display it so we can prove that it's happening. So I've got this little subroutine here, display droid. And so within this display droid item, all I'm going to do is, based on a input parameter of type droid, I can go ahead and define the labels in my output. Now I'm going to paste this code in here. I've already got it written. So the idea here is that my output, this is a label where this was a text box, so there you can see that they're different, and these are the output versions. So we can define the output from a droid class object, which is pretty cool. And we can go ahead and use that as many times as we want. and we can create new ones by just using the new constructor. So by doing that, the last thing we have to do here is after, when we've saved it, after we've actually declared it, and is to actually run the display droid thing, and we're going to send in D. So we've defined a new droid here as D, we've set its properties, and we're going to use that as the input parameter for display droid. So it's a D here and just droid to use here, but it's the same droid, and then output it. And that allows us to use this display droid from wherever we want. We want to keep this separate, because if we want to use it here, or in the next tutorial we have a list box which we're going to use. So let's check our error list. Okay, we've got no errors, a few warnings here, and that's no worry, we'll come back to those in the next tutorial. So we're going to go ahead and save that, and let's run this form. And you can see we've got a droid factory. We can create R2-D2, and the owner is Obi-Wan Kenobi. And then we can set our primary colors. Primary color is silver, and his secondary color is navy blue. And there we go. So he's in servers, R2-D2, Obi-Wan. So we can save that droid. So when I clicked on that save droid, remember I created a D instance of a droid class object. I populated its properties. Then I said display droid, where I took another instance of a droid, used its properties as the output. So when I did that, it saved what I had in the input and the creator object group box here, and in the details box it output that value. So let's just do one more quickly. So C3PO in service, the owner was Anakin, spell it right, Anakin Skywalker. The primary color was gold. Gold's not in the list, so we'll go here and define a custom color. I believe 210 would do the trick. Like that. And the secondary color, his secondary color was silver. So there it is. Again, we can save the droid. It takes that class, instantiates it, stores it, sends it as an input parameter to our display droid subroutine procedure, and then outputs it here. So if we just close this quickly and look at the code again, just basically when we hit the save button, we can use that droid type that we've defined using subnew as a constructor, set the properties manually, overriding the defaults that are already there, and then send that as a parameter into a separate subroutine, which then outputs the information back out again. So it allows us to keep track of it and use that droid class object many times. The next tutorial will expand this into using an array of droids and populating a list box from an array of droids. Thank you so much.